this is Billy Peterson again with Harnessing Your Wealth. I wanted to welcome everyone who's listening, tell you a little bit about our guest today, who is actually a return guest, our first returning guest. And the reason why we asked her to be back is because of the popularity of the session that we had. This was back in August of 2023. Episode number 15. Before we get started, I'll invite you all to take a trip back and listen to that episode if you haven't already, or maybe re-listen to it if you did. So you get a bit of a background on what we talked about and some of the issues that we're dealing with in society today. And of course, this episode is going to be touching on the mental health issues. Now, it doesn't maybe speak volumes to what this show talks about mainly, which is financial empowerment, but we certainly find the parallels because health and wealth are directly related. And we thought it would be appropriate in the month of May to talk about these issues because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I'll maybe provide a little bit of context on mental health right now, in that the form sometimes brings out negative connotation. Whenever anyone says the word mental health, I think most of us, myself included, immediately think of something negative or wrong or something a little strange or off if a person mentions that they might have a mental health concern or they're dealing with a mental health problem at the moment. And I think that's because in society, we've given it that negative stigma. People that maybe need psychiatric treatment or are unstable. I mean, none of us really want to admit those types of things. And I think sometimes it brings about a level of fear. If we say someone is mentally unstable, it's definitely not someone we want to associate with too closely, unless they're, of course, a friend or close friend or a family member, and we try to help them best we can. But I wanted to maybe set the table with that and then help everyone understand that these things are more common than we realize. And it doesn't mean that you're weird or you have something drastically wrong with you when you're struggling with something emotionally. And so I'd like to maybe rephrase that term rather than mental health is your emotional health, your emotional makeup. And are you stable in that regard? And have you found a way to deal with all the issues in today's society? Because oftentimes we need help. So with that background and that context, and now welcome our guest on the show, my wife, Heather Peterson. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here again.
We're grateful. Of course, the backup sidekick, Shaun, is on the show. Thanks for being here, Shaun.
Always happy to be here, and welcome, Heather. Good to see you. I think I saw you yesterday, but it's good to see you again.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And as I mentioned, the last time we had you on was back in August of last year. So we covered a lot of ground back then, talked about a lot of childhood experiences, like adverse childhood experiences, and how they can play a major role in issues, health-related issues later in life, how they kind of stick around because they're buried in subconscious mind or they're repressed. And so maybe we can kind of pick up where we left off there, that show. And again, the popularity of that show was unexpected, to be honest. I think that just speaks volumes to how popular or how important this conversation is. So let's talk a little bit about why you think, Heather, why you think people are dealing with such a large volume of issues with their health and with depression and anxiety, and where all that comes from, and why you think that is in today's society.
Sure. I think it looks different for every, you would say, age bracket. The baby boomers, they're all going to look at differently than maybe the teenagers versus the 40 and 50-year-olds. versus, the young tweens. And so I really think we have to say, why is this an issue for each age group, and how does it all blend us together, and why is it such an issue in today's age? I would say from a larger perspective, it's a lack of connection. Think of all the time we spend on all of our phones and how much time we actually intentionally spend connecting with our kids, our spouse, our employees, right? Employers. How often are we connecting and caring what was going on in everyone's lives? A lot of times we're just spinning our wheels, trying to get through the day, being the best parents we can, grandparents, whatever that looks like for you. And there's a large sense of connection and loneliness in people. And so that kind of sets the stage for most mental health, is this lack of connection. And for those who don't know, I'm a mind-body coach. For those listening for the first time, I deal with people in chronic pain, disease, and emotional turmoil. And so I help them overcome those things, not just get rid of them for a short time, but actually overcome these big things. And when I first start working with a client, I have what's called a discovery meeting. As you heard in my first podcast, I probably elaborated on that more, but this discovery meeting is imperative because I ask a lot of deep personal questions about what's going on in your life. And most people say, no one's ever asked me these things. No one's ever listened before. And I ask them to be completely honest and completely vulnerable and share these things with me. And I do have a confidentiality agreement around that. But a lot of times, this is people being honest with themselves for the first time. And a lot of it's unconscious thinking and habits and behavior that sets the stage for all of our mental health problems in society.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bring up, is how people handle those things and how you help them handle them and process them. So you gave us a little bit about your background and the steps in your process when people reach out to you. But you also, I think, hit on something that is maybe the underpinning issue, is the phones and the way we're interacting with, or lack of interacting with people. Do you think that's one of the biggest issues going on in society today?
Absolutely. I think every client, that is the basis of their pain. They feel alone and they feel disconnected from their family, from even the outside world. And people don't know how to interact. You go to the grocery store and you don't even make eye contact with the person checking you out. It's a huge sense of disconnect. And if we were to go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was a different way of life. If you drive into Morgan County, people are going to wave at you and you don't know them. And it feels weird to people who aren't familiar with the way we are in our city. So there's a huge sense of disconnect. I have pretty much every client I work with feels disconnected in some way, or feels not heard or validated, whether that's their current circumstances, their traumas that they've been through, or their childhood belief systems where this is just the way it is. Or just, my mom and dad just said, get to work and, put your head down and quit complaining, quit crying about it, and just keep plowing through. And I think that's a huge disservice. I mean, I feel it's kind of can go both ways, where you learn to be tough, but on the opposite end, I think a lot of us are too hardened, where we can't open up and be vulnerable and share things and connect, because I don't know about you guys, but I feel more connected to the people where I share a common bond, and I feel like they're more human than perfect.
What about social media? It seems like everybody's posting their best life, right? They're not posting, let's be honest, they're not posting the truth, the fight with the spouse, or the disappointment they had at work, or something like that. So I think people often see social media and they're like, oh man, I'm not like that person. They're doing way better than me. And I think people lose context of, hey, that's not always reality. And we start comparing ourselves, right? Like, oh, they're on another trip, or they got this promotion. What am I doing with my life? I think there's a tendency for that to happen too. Do you see that a lot?
Oh, yes, for sure. And I immediately thought of, COVID, when COVID hit and we were all homebound and no one was flying on any vacation, no one was doing anything exciting and wonderful. It totally leveled the playing field, I think, for a lot of people. And for me, I was like, oh, good, they're not going on a trip. I'm not alone in this. I'm also sitting at my house,
Mm-hmm.
But now we're back in it, and we've got these young teenagers where they think they need to always go and do and have all these things, and we're doing a huge disservice to them. And I know Billy and I have had countless conversations with each other, with our kids, about we just need to put our phones away and how hard that is to do. It's such a simple thing, and it is so hard to just set that down and be present, because we're constantly tied to information and it's that stimulation, and it's really doing us a huge disservice to our mental health.
I find the same thing, with the social media. It's kind of like, why do people have a TV service anymore? Like Kate and I sit at home and maybe the TV's on, but we're not watching it. We're not connecting into a show or something. We're scrolling, right? And it's almost like a weird addiction. And then, all right, I'm on social media, but then, oh, there's an email from Billy or Kate. It's like, okay, now it's work time and it's like 9 o'clock at night. And where do you find the time to disconnect and reconnect with either yourself or your spouse or your friends and family? It's difficult to do. And I'm guilty as it. As charged as everybody else. So it's tough.
Well, we get habit. We develop habits, and it's routine, and it's, they call it those little endorphins, those chemicals that we feel when we're constantly scrolling. And then how often have we sat there and looked at our phone and come back to reality and snapped back to the moment, thought, what have I just been doing with my life for the last hour? Of course, that's, for the most part, a waste of your time. But Heather, with regards to all of that and kind of the context around it, and you're working with clients regularly every day, and people are calling you all the time to seek help. And we're not just talking about help from anxiety and depression. We're talking about all sorts of conditions, people that just can't figure out why they don't feel good, or why their life is a mess, or where things went wrong. What are some of the conditions that you're seeing people not only dealing with regards to the current world we're in, like pain conditions, disease? What are the most common things you're seeing? And then what do you attribute those to for the most part?
Well, I work with a lot of women right now. I have not had one client that doesn't have some form of anxiety or depression, not one. And if that doesn't speak volumes to our mental health, I don't know what does, because depression is living in the past and anxiety is living in the future. And how often are we present with ourselves, with our families, with our loved ones? It's far and few between. But along with that, fibromyalgia is really big. Migraines are big. Stomach issues, IBS, all kinds of autoimmune diseases, Hashimoto's, chronic fatigue, a lot of chronic fatigue, all kinds of full body pain, nerve pain. I work with a lot of people with a lot of CRPS, knee pain. I mean, it's just so prevalent. There's not a condition that I don't work with. And all of it boils down to the same thing. We are in this cortisol response. It's a chemical change in our body that we don't know how to shut off. There's a healthy level of cortisol, and there's extremely elevated levels of cortisol. And think of the day-to-day things that you're doing and thinking, and we're always in this go, go, go. And how often are we stopping and watching the bird fly in the sky and putting our feet in the grass and all of these, kind of kooky things for most people? But how often are we present with our surroundings and listening to our children have conversations with each other and really just appreciating life? The sense of fulfillment in this society is minimal. I ask a lot of questions when I do this discovery meeting, and people are very able to tell me about all their stresses. They are very unable to tell me what fulfills them in life.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. It's very sad. It's heartbreaking, actually.
Here's a question. So this just came to mind, but Shaun and I just wrapped up a discovery meeting with a new potential client, and I, of course, won't name names, but he was talking to us about his retirement and about what they want to do, but he just kept going back to the issue of his health has deteriorated rapidly and not going to be able to do the things he wanted to do, had to give up all of his activities. And so I asked him to elaborate a little bit on that. And he said that he has developed a form of emphysema, COPD, his lungs, he just can't breathe like he did before.
Mm-hmm.
But then he said, I'm not a smoker. I've never been a smoker. I've never been exposed to smoke or pollutions, but the doctors told him that it's because he's lived in Salt Lake City and worked in Salt Lake City for 30 years. And he's just been breathing the polluted air.
Hmm.
Now, what is your reaction to that?
Mine always comes from an emotional standpoint because everything that manifests physically has an emotional root. And so the emotion for the lungs is grief. The lungs are our grief center. The liver is our anger center. I could go on and on about every organ has a specific emotion associated with it. And so I would say there's some deeply rooted grief within him that needs to be processed. And you would be surprised how many miracles unfold when you can dig a little deeper about what is in people's past, what they've endured, the hard things, the emotions that they never processed, because you just got to keep your head down and everything's okay and it's fine. But deep down, it's not fine. And when I bring that to people's attention, that it's okay to feel those hard moments of their past, their physical problems eliminate themselves.
How much is it that they maybe refuse to see it versus how much is it that they're told a different story by the medical community, so they don't know that that's even a problem?
Sure. Well, I would say you're the same way, Billy.
Yes.
When COVID happened, remember how many times you had left knee pain and you couldn't go to CrossFit and you couldn't do the things you wanted to do and you were frustrated and you couldn't go up and down the stairs and you were so upset about it. And I said, well, what's the left knee, Billy? And the left knee is not being receptive to things. And what are you not being receptive to? And, I could go make a laundry list of things you were not receptive to on a daily basis.
Government policy. Government policy.
Shaun, be quiet. You were supposed to be here to just observe.
But you addressed it. You said, yeah, I am upset about all these things. And so it's simple acknowledgement. It's not that you have to change the past. It's not that you have to let go of the control that you don't have over what's happened to you or what's currently going on to eliminate these things that are coming up physically for you.
Right. But here's my deeper question. If someone believes wholeheartedly in the medical model and they're told something by a white coat, mm-hmm. that their problem is a physical one, or mm-hmm. it's brought about by a physical toxin or pollutant, like in this case, or from overstressing a certain body part, then how does someone get out of that mindset? And how do they decide, how do they go against that? That's what I'm trying to get. I know I had to do it. I know how hard it was for me, but I want you to tell our listeners how you help other people. And then I want to get into you mentioned miracles. I want you to give us some examples. So let's start with that first part.
Well, it's actually amazing. The first couple of meetings, I do a lot of exercises where I help people tap into their body because they're not aware of it. Most of us are living, but we're completely unaware of our body and how a thought makes us feel a certain way. And so a huge part of my first beginning of my process is to show how the mind is connected to the body with a simple exercise that I walk them through. And I start connecting them back into their body. Another component of that is testimonials. There's countless testimonials out there. Thank you, drsarno.org. You can go to Amazon and look at any doctor a Dr. Sarno book or a Dr. Joe Dispenza book, and you can find countless testimonials. You can go to Joe Dispenza's website and you can find all the videos. You can go to Steve Ozanich's Wall of Victory on YouTube and find countless videos. And so a lot of times I point these videos of these people who have overcome their very condition that they have to see what's available to them, and that other people are overcoming it. And Dr. Joe calls it running the 4-minute mile, right? It used to be impossible. And every time somebody gets it quicker, then people see, oh, I can do that too. And so it's just almost having faith that anything is available to you at any time.
Yeah.
And that belief system is everything. If you believe you can do something, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. And so it's a huge component of breaking down a belief, which is just a thought we think over and over until it's true. And before we can think a thought, we have to have an emotion before we think a thought, right? And before we have an emotion, we have to have a state. How's my body? How's my posture? How's my body language? What am I focusing on? Am I thinking about the past and the future or the present moment? And what is my language about my day-to-day life? Do I hate it? Do I love it? Do I hate this person all the time? Or is life good for me? And so a huge component of it breaks down to a belief system of whether you can or whether you can't.
Maybe to also back up and help our listeners understand why this is so important to all of us is the issues we had to go through. When I'm talking about that right now, I'm referring to myself and Heather. Shaun, you've also had your own issues that you've had to overcome or deal with, and I'll let you speak to that. But I know for me personally, it was debilitating back pain and eye pain. I had acid reflux, they call it GERD. They have to give it a label. They have to give these things a label of a disease. And so going where I was in my life and dealing with all that pain that I had, specifically the back pain, and the number of specialists, the number of doctor appointments and visits, and the amount of time, effort, anxiety, the number of appointments and the amount of money I spent was beyond belief for a lot of people. Ultimately came to the conclusion after, I found another, just kept spinning my wheels over and over and looking at different Facebook posts or Google posts. And then you find a post that has a certain symptom. And then you think, well, yeah, that's probably me. That might be me. That might be the condition that I have. And so that took me in the direction of maybe I have an issue with an autoimmune condition. So I'll go see a rheumatologist. Sure enough, you go to a rheumatologist and they take a blood test and then they say, oh, yes, you have the marker for this disease in your blood. So bingo, that's what I have. So then you accept that. Again, that's that mindset that we have traditionally. We believe in the medical system. We're taught to do that from a young age because doctors make us better or pills make us better. We get a headache. Here's two Aleve. Here's an ibuprofen. And so we get trained to do that. But yet when you don't get better and when they tell you can't get better or it's incurable, and again, back to the mind, and what the mind tells us is what is produced in our life. And study up on the placebo and the nocebo effects. It's fascinating that the mind can do everything a pill can do and then some. And if you don't believe me, then go look at all these different studies they've done. And I say any kind of study, they base it against a placebo group, a double-blind study, where the people who are getting a fake or a phony or a sham pill or a sham surgery, they didn't even do anything. They just made them believe that they did. They cut a couple notches in a knee, for example, or a shoulder, put some stitches in it. The patient wakes up and believes that they had the surgery. Guess what? Their pain is gone. Or they gave them the sugar pill and their symptoms are gone. Yet they got nothing other than the belief that they receive something.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we should be tapping into more and studying more? Knowing what I know and I had to overcome the medical model, overcome the white coat syndrome, I call it, and luckily find a doctor who disagreed with everything that I'd been told
Yeah.
in order to get myself healed, 100% healed. And they told me I couldn't. They told me I never would. They told me I'd never overcome the acid reflux. Guess what? Oh, I did. There's so many things I could point to, and Heather and I know this because we spend a lot of our time talking about it. But we try to help people understand that these things and what we've been told is a conflict of interest, because that's how doctors and pharmaceutical companies are compensated, is by keeping patients tied down to that model.
Yeah.
What else can I say?
Well, if you take it back to mental health and not just chronic pain issues, I've dealt with a lot of people with mental health issues. I have several people who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And once I have dove into these people and really weeded out what happened to them in childhood, who do they have to become? What are all of these traumas they've endured? It makes complete sense to me why they've been labeled with bipolar, because they've had to adapt to be that person to survive in their family unit. That is why they've been labeled as this bipolar. But when in reality, they have an unsettled nervous system. And so they react according to their environment. And so once I give them tools of how to think, how to process information, bam, no more bipolar medication. And so if that doesn't scream to you, mental health labels of any sort, whether that's bipolar or ADHD or whatever have you, this is a label, and it's not a life sentence. It is something anything is overcomable.
I think also, and kind of just basing some of this on my own experience, growing up as a kid, I was a worrier. I don't know if that's in the Peterson bloodline, going back to Grandpa Ace and Grandpa Dick, going way back, Billy, but it seems like we're kind of wired that way. We're worriers, high energy. And I was that way as a kid. And, you kind of just deal with it. Back then, you definitely didn't talk about mental illness. It was, hey, buck up, you're just fine, get back in the saddle. And I think some of that is okay to say, but, going into adulthood, graduating high school, going to college, again, putting a lot of pressure on myself, like your body feels that, right? That unease in your mental state, and it can cause other symptoms. And I still remember going to a doctor and saying, hey, I'm feeling this way. I'm super anxious. I feel like I'm having panic attacks. Remember, this is in my early 20s, still a pup probably. And the answer was, well, here's this prescription, start taking it. And I still remember thinking, I don't want to do that. And this just seems like a quick fix, and everyone wants a quick fix, right? And I just thought, when do I feel my best? When do I feel okay? And it's usually like after some sort of activity, okay? Like a walk, a lift workout, a CrossFit workout, a hike, talking with someone about it. That's when I realized, okay, this is a better path than the quick fix. And it seems like everyone is after that, where it's just, oh, you have this symptom, here's a pill. Okay, well, this pill might cause this symptom. Here's a pill for that. And before you know it, that cycle is endless. So I think people need to step back and say, what am I doing in my day-to-day life to decompress all the thoughts? Because like we said earlier, the thoughts are all there. It's on your phone, it's in your email, it's the day-to-day work life, retirement life, whatever it might be, where it can get you so wound up. And if you don't do something to decompress, then you can find yourself with physical ailments, just like Bill and Heather, you said you've had too. So
You bet.
I remember that. That's me trying to be Heather professionally, but I knew you were going to say all that.
Oh, I love it, Shaun, because we went through this with both of our boys, both Brig and Cade. They they were diagnosed with ADHD and ADD. They couldn't sit still in their class. They wouldn't stay seated, and the teachers were really frustrated. And think about these young boys who have a lot of energy sitting in class for 6 hours a day. That's a tall order in our society. And these kids need physical movement. They need to connect. They need to not be sitting in a chair. And so we tried medication for both of our boys, and it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
Cade, we medicated Cade, and he talked 1,000 miles an hour, and it scared the hell out of him. And we hated it, and we didn't know what to do for him. And we didn't understand the mind-body connection at that time. And Brig, we medicated him, and it dulled his sweet little spunky self. And he wasn't eating, and that wasn't a good option for us. It was not a good road. And to reflect back on what was going on for both of our boys at those ages, it breaks my heart, because they were going through hard things with being in a blended family and having instability with what was going on in their lives. And they just needed a listening ear, and they needed to move their bodies. And we had to sit down with the teachers and say, we're not medicating these kids. And so give them a whiteboard and they can write their answers instead of shouting them out. And we've got to find a compromise for these young kids and what works. And therapy was a huge outlet for my youngest son, being able to talk. And then he was able to get off the medication. And my doctor, the pediatrician, was actually the one that recommended that. He said, I don't think he needs medication. I think he needs to talk about what's going on in his life. And he was 7 years old.
And Heather, I think some of the most powerful lessons that we learn when we're talking about doctors and then maybe choosing to possibly go a different route and taking matters into your own hands, the examples of those who have actually done it and actually have gotten well again from whatever condition. And you've seen it all. And we've read stories, just miraculous stories of people overcoming illnesses and diseases that are considered death sentences or considered non-recoverable. So you've worked with people from all ages, like the kids you were just talking about with anxiety, unable to fit in classrooms, unable to cope. And I know there for a while you were getting one after another, moms bringing their young children to you. And then, you're just doing such wonderful things with them. They just keep referring others and their friends to you. So maybe start there and then give us just a few examples, of different types of things that you've seen and the different conditions that you've helped people overcome or even heard about.
Sure. I will say this, as I've worked with young kids as young as 7, I think the better idea, instead of me working with the child, I think therapy's good to an extent with children, but I feel like working with the parents is more important to begin with, because if you can give the parents the tools, they can cater them to fit their needs, these children's needs. And so when the parents are empowered and the parents have these tools, the family unit functions much better than just trying to change the child and not the rest of the family unit. And so I feel when parents come to me to work with their children, I say, I would prefer to work with you first, because we teach these habits and these behaviors and these thoughts to our children who pattern their behavior after us. And so I think that's where we start. We start with the parents. As far as things people have overcome, I mean, I see it every day. I hear about it every day. I'm constantly reading emails from clients and corresponding with what's going on with their thought processes. And it's so rewarding to find people who are homebound and on disability and all of these things, that they're now able to get out and live life. And people who once thought, this is going to be my life forever, I'm never going to be able to walk, I'm going to be tied to a walker. And I mean, from not even being able to get out of bed to fully functioning adults going back to work being off of disability, I mean, that's where our society needs to go, because we are so quick to put people in a bracket where they say, okay, this is your life now. This is your label. This is your path. There's nothing more for you. And so you give people their life back. When you can change thoughts and habits and behaviors, your chemical makeup in your body goes from cortisol and adrenaline to serotonin and oxytocin. And chemically, you're making something completely different. The body cannot heal when it's running from a wild bear in the fight or flight mode. But if you can get the body to relax, you can have logic and reason, then you can be creative, and then you can actually believe that something better is out there for you. And that, again, it boils down to, do you believe that this is your path? Do you believe that this is your lot in life and this is all there is for you? And you're just going to be home and you're going to suffer and die? Or do you believe that that's not something you want for yourself? It's as simple as that. And so when you can help people to understand their huge condition of being disabled can be eliminated, it speaks volumes to what's available to people. And people get referred to me all the time because of what they overcome. It's very empowering.
Yeah, and you put out a lot of testimonials, and so I would highly recommend those listening to tap into Heather's website, listen to some of the testimonials, read some of them, follow her. You know, when I was trying to overcome my problems health-wise, what helped me more than anything was to read and reread and continue to immerse myself in the stories of those who have overcome, the stories of those who went against what they were told and who actually did something different. And so we're not talking about just a lucky draw or some woo-woo stuff here. We're talking about changing your belief system and changing your thoughts to believe that you can heal, to believe that your body knows how to do it if you just let it. But you can't feed it fear, and you can't keep fear driving the truck, because your body doesn't operate well that way. And when you believe and you get calm and you start breathing, and then you start realizing and truly trusting that you can heal from whatever condition you have, well, that's when the miracles start happening. But you can't have any doubt. There can't be any doubt. And that's how placebo works. Placebo doesn't work when you think maybe or possibly. It works when you trust, wholeheartedly trust, that you're going to do whatever it is that you think you're going to do. So, Heather, how do people get a hold of you and follow you?
You bet. I am most commonly found on Instagram at painfreeforgood. You can also email me at painfreeforgood7@gmail.com. And you can shoot me a DM or an email, and I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for listening to us today. Heather, thanks for joining us. And we appreciate all your thoughts and comments, knowing that all those folks listening to Harnessing Your Wealth, you know, if you don't have your health, what good is your wealth? So that's another reason why we think staying focused on these other topics that sometimes get overlooked, they're important to bring to the forefront. And we deal with it so often. Everyone here in our office, we hear from our clients, we talk to our friends and associates, we know people who are having difficulties and struggles. Sometimes it's really sad because we mention that there's a different way. We mention that there's a possibility for people to heal from whatever they have. And the sad part is too many people won't listen to that. They would rather stay in the mindset that they're in because they think that that's the only answer for them. And that's the sad truth. But Heather has the answer for you. And I would encourage all of you to reach out to her, follow her, and open your eyes to the possibilities. I know that's what changed my life, and I got my life back. So thanks, Heather.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Heather.
Everyone take care out there. We'll talk to you again. See you on the next show.
Thank you for listening to Harnessing Your Wealth with Billy Peterson. Before we declare the race official, please click the follow button so you can be notified when new episodes become available. For more information about today's show, please check out the show notes. Visit our website at www.petersonws.com or give us a call at 801-475-4002. Once again, thank you for listening. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Peterson Wealth Services. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.